Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of GOREFEST at Tiffany's here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. My name is Matthew. Joining me tonight is Jeff
Hey, what's up?
and a very special guest that we like to bring on when things get a little sexy, our good friend, host of the Zombie Girls, Rachel.
I think it's appropriate tonight. Our show is a menage a trois.
We need some
Hey,
supervision, some adult supervision.
that's true. That's true. What we need to do is we need
I
to
like that we both went very different ways, Jeff.
Well, what we really need to do is I need to get one of those filters that makes the video look scrambled. So, like when we were kids in the 90s
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
flipping through the cable, and you'd see you didn't have
Yeah.
Cinemax or anything, but late night you would see it scrambled. And if you waited like 30 seconds, a boob would just appear in the scramble. And you're like, yes, that's what we had to
Is
do to
that
look at boobs.
true? That feels like an urban legend. Did the boob ever actually appear? Because I feel like whenever
100%.
I was at someone's house and we attempted it, oh wow,
I never
I guess
had
I
that.
was
We
just being
had we
patient.
had like the one for me it was, and we'll get into this later, I suppose, but it was like the one kid in town whose parents did have HBO and a VCR, and he managed to catch something on tape at the right time.
Yeah.
And then that tape got passed all around the neighborhood over and over and
Kids
over.
these days will never know the struggle. They will
Yeah.
never know.
It was a
Build
struggle.
character to do that.
And I'll throw something out here
It
that
was.
yeah, I'll throw something out here that I'm not embarrassed to say this. My grandma was the only person who had HBO in our family, and it was always a treat to get to go over to grandma's house on the weekend and stuff like that. But Tales from the Crypt would always be on Friday nights, and I taught my grandma. I was like, Grandma, here's a blank VHS. You stick it in your VCR
Yeah.
and you hit record and just let it go, Grandma. It doesn't matter. You could just let it go the entire night. Well, of course, it would boom, get me Tales from the Crypt, but then it's like real sex and all these other HBO adult shows
Yeah.
because it would just record on there. It's like, so yeah. The things we had to do when we were 12 years old to see a boob, that's the thing. But you might be wondering, everybody out there, why are we talking about this tonight on Gorefest at Tiffany's? It's because tonight, what we do here is we are going through everything Tiffany Shepis has ever done. So we're starting at the very beginning of her IMDb page and working our way through to the present day. Could take us 10 years to get through all of this. I don't know how long it's going to take us. But when we were initially sort of planning out like the episode blocks, because we're taking movies in chunks, and I sort of saw all of these movies in a block in the early 2000s. And I was like, how are we going to do this? Like, it's going to be kind of weird. I'm just like, why don't we got to talk about them, right? We're actually going to have a pretty, I hope, intellectual, if I can use that word, discussion about nudity, horror, scream queens, things of that nature. And we're going to use these films that Tiffany Shepis was in the early 2000s as kind of a jumping point to a greater conversation about, what are these movies about? Like, had any of us actually sat down and watched one of these kind of like Skinamax films before from beginning to end? Is there anything of value in these movies? Is there, what has happened to these movies? Because in this day and age, right, where you can just get online and see, the worst things in the world. Is there even a place for films like this and stuff? We're going to talk about that. So we brought Rachel on. Now, Rachel, what were your thoughts when we're like, hey, okay, Jeff and Matthew want me on Gorefest at Tiffany's, but it's the episode about like racy stuff.
So I don't think I totally understood exactly what I was coming on here
Yeah.
until I popped on Emmanuel.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a trap. You got me.
Yeah.
But like then I kind of understood. I got it. Like I'm here as the Smurfette of the network to like give you cover as
Yes,
we talk
give us
about
cover.
this. And
It
lucky
was
for
like,
you,
tell us
I
more.
appreciate a good sexy film. So I'm actually excited to talk about these tonight.
Yeah, and spoiler, we might actually have some positive things to say about some of these films. We will discuss that. Now, Rachel, you watched our previous episode, and you had
I
a
did.
great revelation to us in the Discord. What had you seen before?
You guys started talking about the Wonder Bra
Astounding.
commercial, and I was just like, I remember Wonder Bra. Like I'm a woman of a certain age. I remember when those were like like the technological advance. They were the AI before AI, right? And then you guys started talking about the commercial. And I don't remember the context of how I saw it, but I 1,000,000% saw this at the time because I
Awesome.
remember specifically the engineering and the like
Yeah, that's so cool.
weird science like
This is what the
diagrams.
space station is made out of.
And then years later, when I was temping, like, after high school, I worked at an engineering firm where they were doing bra engineering.
Wow.
So I have, yes, it is an ongoing struggle. It's true. Like the engineering required to create a bra that will, do all the things, all the lies you want it to tell and still be comfortable is quite a feat.
That's awesome.
But
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Like, because we were actually discussing, like, who would watch this? Was this like an infomercial, like super late night or something?
The format is weird. The format is weird.
I mean, like I said, I can't totally remember the context, but I feel like it was probably something that was created to be put into like news footage, things
Mhm.
like that, like basically like
Okay.
like news stories that they could pull clips from it as b-roll or portions of it. And I think that's probably how I saw it. I probably saw it as part of a news story about like this new like trend that's taking over kind of thing, like that kind of coverage, and they were pulling clips from it because I 100% saw portions of that one. Like as an impressionable, freshly boob having human, I was like, tell me more about this wonder bra.
So way back in the day, we were all watching Tiffany Shepis movies. Well, give us your thoughts on Tiffany Shepis. What was your sort of interactions? I mean, maybe I don't know. You've been to lots of conventions. Have you ever met her in the past? Have you watched her movies? What are your thoughts on Tiffany Shepis?
So honestly, I knew the name and I knew she was a scream queen, and I've definitely seen things with her in it. But like my first real Tiffany Shepis experience was Emmanuel 2000.
Oh, no.
Whoa!
So in some ways, it's kind of good.
Whoa!
I'm coming in super fresh. Like I definitely watched Picard, so I definitely saw her in
Uh-huh.
that. But like
Okay.
something where I was specifically seeking her out. So I think that my take on her, I don't have the same background, but like I can speak to how she translates as a real first time watch.
Well, that's fun
Okay.
too, because like, I
Yeah.
think Matt and I agree that it's a real it factor. It's something that
Mhm.
comes a charisma that comes across that's,
Mhm.
obviously, we wouldn't have come up with this idea if that wasn't the case. So that'll be fun
Yeah.
to, just, travel along. Like, when you show someone else something that you really like, like, that's
Yeah.
fun.
Hmm.
That's just fun to do.
I mean, I'm the right age, but
Mhm.
like you have to remember that I grew up without cable. I grew up without all of these things, all the access to pop culture. Like I in a very very strict household where I was not allowed to see anything. So I kind of came into my horrordom later, and I missed a lot of this. So I'm getting a little bit of an education. So I'm going to be like definitely following along with this.
Interesting. And I think, maybe down the line, if you remind me later in this episode, it could be kind of interesting to discuss whether or not there are scream queens like Miss Shepis nowadays. Because I know, like, I'm
To
in
me, she's like
pre-production.
the last one. I don't.
Maybe, like, well, there's definitely actors from a certain generation that I think we really identify as scream queens. And I'm
Yeah.
in pre-production of a feature film right now, and we're looking for names. Like, well, who's like the 23-year-old equivalent of Tiffany Shepis today? And I'm not talking about people like
Like, who's
Micah
the young
Monroe
woman
and
who's in the
that stuff,
Scream
because
movies? Like her, maybe?
Jenna Ortega. See, I wouldn't consider them to be like the equivalent of Tiffany Shepis, because Tiffany Shepis, as we'll
Mhm.
talk about going through, they're in much lower budget movies.
Yeah.
Jenna Ortega is like in Hollywood productions, multi-million dollar things, and I don't think the same
Mhm.
expectations for a scream queen necessarily from our generation are kind of placed on these actors who are in bigger Hollywood fare. But I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, Rachel. I mean, you're into this kind of stuff. Like, who's the hot, B B film scream queens of today?
I think the problem is that B movies like this, they don't exist in the same way that they used to.
Yeah.
Like it's just like there's VOD things like that, but there isn't that same sort of B market. There everything is kind of going like, there isn't, like, that sort of, like, punky DIY sort of B movie really anymore. Like, there's, like everything has become, like, an indie horror film.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's just not the same, and I'm trying to think of who could even and I think this Final Girl her itself has totally evolved in a way that, like, doesn't really allow for that sort of, like, our traditional Final Girl, the way that we knew them in the coming out of exploitation and, like, in the '80s and '90s and early 2000s, like,
That's a good point.
she is a different girl now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like everything is like something could be straight to VOD, straight to Amazon or something, and it's just different from picking up like Night of the Demons or something like that. Like I can think of
Yeah.
a few actresses who were in like maybe two or three things, like and I'm sorry, I don't know the people's names, but like the actress who was in Get Out was then in that cellist movie that was pretty good, right? I remember that
Allison
one, and then
Williams.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
Allison
and
Williams.
then, the a woman who was in Sabrina was in Black Coat's Daughter, and most recently, Totally Killer or whatever that time travel movie
Hernan
was, right?
Shipka.
So you
Uh-huh.
can pick out some things where, like, I got 2 movies here, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be like and then that becomes their thing.
I mean, we would have to go and look at, like, something like that Blood and Honey movie to see if any of those ladies have been in other things.
Mm,
I think they're almost like outliers now. Like,
yeah.
might be able to, like, reverse engineer it where you can see, like, have any of these women been in other things? Because there just isn't, like, that sort of,
yeah.
like, find it at the VHS energy anymore.
Because we
Mhm.
look at, and obviously we're already starting the conversation before we even get into these movies here, so maybe we should table this. But I do think it's kind of interesting. Like you could name tons of scream queens from like the '80s, right? Like either your Linnea Quigley's, your
Mhm.
Michelle Bowers, like all of these individuals, and they all came out like you said, Rachel, out of a specific type of movie, which was a very exploitation
Mhm.
sort of heavy movie, and where nudity
Mhm.
was expected, extreme violence was expected and things of that nature. But they weren't. I wouldn't call those movies like on the same level as like Hollywood movies of the '80s. Right, like a
Right.
Hollywood budget movie is much
Right.
different than picking up Night of the Demons at your local video store, even though it might have gotten a limited
Mhm.
theatrical release back in the day. And I sort of like look all these movies like that you mentioned, Jeff. I think they're different. I think they are funded by studios with super great tech and everything.
Yeah.
There's a different expectation to those movies. They're not like, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's a slasher thing or just a B monster movie sort of subgenre where a lot of these scream queens came out of, that I feel like that's largely gone today. Or if it's there, I don't know who those people are. And I don't
Right.
know, that could show that this has really, really changed from back in the day, and maybe there just aren't any Debbie Rochons and Tiffany Shepard's and Danielle Harris. They're still doing stuff, obviously, but the next generation of those actors, who are all
Right.
the horror fans now that are putting on Tubi and seeing the newest movie from some independent filmmaker, B movie maker in Ohio,
Mhm.
are they latching on to these people? Are they creating fan pages on Facebook for them and doing all that stuff? If it exists, I don't know who they are, which might just be kind of an indictment on what has happened to the traditional scream queen that we kind of grew up knowing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
we'll
feel
talk.
like I think, like, the Sydney Prescott of it all definitely changed, like, the mainstream scream queen mold.
Yeah,
And now I think when you see sort of, like, horror and nudity, falls into more of the, like, art house side. Like, maybe the closest thing we have to it now is, like, a Mia Goth, who is, like,
yeah,
definitely doing gritty horror things, and,
yeah.
like
That'd be a good
and there
name.
is elements of exploitation and, nudity and sexuality, but it's, like, through a very art house lens. So it's almost like we see it as, like, an elevated kind of nudity that we don't, you know what I mean? And that's sort of
Yeah,
maybe how we work around sort of the changing ideas about, like, female depiction and nudity and horror.
yeah. This is kind of just maybe not something we need to delve on. Just an interesting observation I had. When did the Friday the 13th remake come out? It was like 2010, 2011, something around there. Whenever
Yeah.
Mhm.
Michael Bay was putting
Mhm.
out all those like really
Yeah.
flashy remake
Platinum
ones.
Dunes
Yeah,
era.
Platinum
Platinum Dunes.
Dunes, what a
Yeah.
name.
And I remember people like I went and saw Friday the 13th, and I remember there's being a lot of people when I left the theater who were like, "Oh man, that sucked." And even the online discourse was, "It sucks. It was terrible." And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I feel like things have changed because that movie was basically the closest. I remember being with my friends in high school, 14, 15 years old, and we would rent a shitty Friday the 13th movie with low production values and stuff like that. And, it's got, the topless girl being chased around by Jason or whatever. And we would have conversations like, how cool would this look with like a Hollywood budget, multi-million dollar budget? But you kept the exploitation angle, but they just made it slick. It looked good. It wasn't so poorly sort of produced and put together. And something like for the Friday the 13th remake kind of did that. It was chock full of
Right.
nudity. It was chock full of graphic
Mhm.
violence in a very slick package, and everyone still hated it. So I think, yeah, I definitely think that people's perspectives of this kind of thing have changed. But let's get into some
Mhm.
movies here, because of course this is GoreFest at
Yeah.
Tiffany's, and we are going to talk about a few different films
Yes.
tonight. We're, we're going to get the Emmanuel films out of the way first. I do have a quick little backstory about the Emmanuel films here. Oh wait, actually, forget. See, I have this all out. Housekeeping. It's my ADHD. Kind of rules for the road in terms of what we're doing here, and just to clarify for everybody what's actually happening. So Tiffany Shepis has been nude in lots and lots of movies, and we're going to be covering many of those movies coming up. I think maybe she would even admit that was part of her thing. You would always be like, okay, Tiffany Shepis is going to get topless and murdered in a movie or something as part of the Scream Queen aesthetic. I don't
Mhm.
Yeah.
want to cover that going forward in any other show. So as we're sort of covering these sort of films here, we're just going to like talk about that stuff here and now, and then never shall it be spoken with again, because I don't really care to focus on any of that going forward. I'm sure Jeff doesn't care to focus on any of that going forward either. So we want to be really just sort of respectful. And again, we've already started having the conversation, but just the conversation of what horror fans expect, and whether this was a good thing, bad thing, just our general thoughts on this sort of time period that this was kind of maybe expected in general. And we are going to be talking about films that sort of fall under this kind of softcore umbrella, I guess you would call. So these were films that took mostly on Cinemax late night. I mean, it was kind of like a cultural thing. Everybody knew Skinemax, right? It's
Mhm.
like these movies would
Right.
show up after
Mhm.
midnight, and there'd be tons of them. And just doing research on for this episode, just in general on this kind of subgenre, there are hundreds of these things. Hundreds
Oh
of these
yeah.
things were produced. Rachel, I'll ask you: Do you remember anything about this kind of like Cinemax thing?
Oh
Like, were
yeah.
you at least aware of it, and what were your thoughts on it? Did you ever watch any of these movies at all?
Oh yeah. Like if I was at somebody else's house with cable and they fell asleep, oh, it was on. It was me
Yeah.
and whatever Shannon Tweed was doing that night.
Okay, okay. I mean,
she
fair.
she looms large in my like youthful sexual awakening because of these movies. Like these were like
Okay.
I didn't I didn't have like magazines, anything like that. Like this was, and I didn't have the internet yet because we're old. So this was 100% all of the like sexy content that I saw were these Skinamax movies
Okay,
and a
interesting.
dirty
I
pack
would.
of cards once.
Okay. Okay. So, well, we'll get into that a little bit more later. Jeff, what are your remembrances of these kind of Skinamax movies?
Well, pretty similar to Rachel. Like I'm old enough. I'm of an age where like I got the internet sometime in my later teenage years was when it came to be something that you could even have in your house, right? People who are younger than me probably have no idea, who've always had a phone with internet. Like they don't understand necessarily. I'm not trying to be like I walked, through the snow both ways 2 miles to school every day, like that to the
Walked
kids.
both
But
ways in the
we
It
didn't
snow to
felt
have
get
it.
like
to
it
my
There
waiting
was
for
barn.
that shit to load
there
though.
was a point in time where you didn't just have hot and cold running content like we do now. So there was a period of time where this like represented um, the pinnacle of what I understood to be, naked people content. Like this was what it was. If you got a hold of this was like this is like diamonds from Sierra Leone or something like that. This is you understood that probably some nasty things went into it, but there it was, and the kid in town, like the kids riding around on town on their bikes and passing a VHS tape around. This was what it was.
I
Maybe
distinctly
someone's dad had
remember.
a stack of Playboys or something, but
Yeah. I distinctly remember riding the bus one day, and one of the kids was like, "I took my dad's magazine out of his closet." It was like called Cherry or
yeah,
something, and I was, you're just like,
Oh
"Pe- yeah,
no.
dead serious." And people like, I guess for all the millennials watching or listening to this right now, like we kind of made a joke about it, but it was much more difficult to get a hold of this kind of stuff. Now it's like everything
like
is instant
have you had
access.
the experience? I'm sure you've had the experience. You're on your Twitter feed or your Instagram or even Facebook or Tumblr or whatever the case may be, and you're just scrolling the things that you're interested in, and without any intention on your account, something on your behalf, something comes across your feed and you're like, whoa, I didn't ask for this. And some sort of R-rated, X-rated type of content. You're like, I didn't ask for this. It just invaded my space. Back in those days, it was not like that. You had to, you know, set upon, you
You
fill
did
up a
like
hot air
answer,
balloon and go around the world
riddles
to find this
3.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So it was, yeah. Yeah.
You get that Pentium 75 and your parents are gone. You're trying to load that picture of Alyssa Milano from Embrace the
The
Vampire. It
things
just
going chunk, 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 chunk,
dude, it
down
just
the
like what, a
screen. Yeah.
28.8 modem or something, and then your parents come in the driveway. You're like, oh my god, please,
Yeah.
just show me
You
the
like
boobs before I have
punch
to
a hole
close the
in your
browser
CRT
window.
monitor.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what
I
happened,
mean,
Dad. I don't know.
we were
it's
just
why
tougher
every
people.
girl my age has an unhealthy relationship with like VC Andrews novels and like
Okay.
girls being
Yeah.
trapped in attics,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that was what we
Yep.
had.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That
Yeah,
was you could go to the grocery store and snag a copy of the latest VC Andrews, and it was going to
Okay.
be just like full of incest and problematic shit, but it was like the best you could do. And
yeah.
yeah, broke all of
I,
our brains.
yeah. I mean, it was a thing. I mean, it was a
It was a
cultural
thing.
thing
It was an
at the
era.
time, and Shannon Tweed. I mean, there were bona fide, legitimate, sort of famous people who were in these movies that had a following and whatnot. So
Mhm.
yeah, we're going to talk about those kind of movies tonight. The last thing, as you could probably guess, there's not going to be too many clips in this episode. I have the first two episodes. I've loved to be able to splice clips in here and there. Can't really do that for much of these things. So bear with us as we sort of get through here. And now I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson on the Emmanuel series, which Rachel's now favorite
Please.
softcore
I've been wondering.
series. So the Emmanuel series, this
You
actually
gotta
was a
have the
French
like
film
da
series.
da 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 going.
Yes. Yeah. Uh, the Emmanuel series was a
Give it the
French
gravitas it deserves.
gravitas. I love that word. Um, French film series debuted in 1974. It was based on a novel called Emmanuel: The Joys of a Woman, which was written by Emmanuel Arsan in 1967. And I think these movies are really big in France. I think that I read that the
Okay.
original Emmanuel is still one of the biggest movies ever in France. And when a new Emmanuel movie comes out, it's like a mini event in France. So they love their Emmanuel stuff here. And so basically every decade there's been a new Emmanuel. So in the 90s, the actress that they chose as Emmanuel was Krista Allen. And if you don't know who Krista Allen is, if you remember Jim Carrey's Liar Liar and the scene with him in the elevator when she's standing there and
Mhm.
he talks about how great her boobs are, that was Emmanuel for that decade. The two Emmanuel movies that were on Miss Shepus's IMDb page were Emmanuel 2000 Intimate Encounters and Emmanuel 2000 Emmanuel Pie. So these were actually both directed by Rolf Konevsky. Now, Rolf Konevsky is an awesome director. He's done a ton of horror movies and a ton of them with Tiffany Shepis. And so if you check our channel now, I did a Forgotten Horrors episode on a movie called The Hazing, which we are going to cover on GoreFest at Tiffany's coming up in a few episodes, because I really love that movie. And so I reached out to Mr. Konevsky, and he was kind enough to give me all kinds of information about the creation, the background of making that movie, and stuff like that. So check that out in the Forgotten Horror series. But through that conversation, I sort of told him, hey, yeah, we're going to be doing GoreFest at Tiffany's, and any information you can help provide, please pass it my way. So I reached out to him because he directed both of these movies. Like,
Because
why?
they're like 2 entries in a series of like 10 movies or something, right?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of these, and I think they even. I
Yeah.
could be wrong. It's kind of confusing, but I think they actually filmed a bunch and then smashed some together to turn them feature length, and
Yeah, seems like it.
it's really, really weird. But we'll get Emmanuel Pye out of the way first, because Tiffany Shepis is not actually in that. So on her IMDb, it does say she's credited. If you look at the actual end credit sequence, it says she plays a biker chick. But the actual backstory of that is she was supposed to play the biker chick. However, she, and unbeknownst to me, I did not know about this until Mr. Konevsky told me, she had to miss the shoot. And she missed the shoot because she actually got cast in Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor in 2001, which was not on her IMDb. So I guess
I'm gonna have to watch that.
Yes, we have to, because it's GoreFest at Tiffany's. We've got to watch a Michael Bay movie now.
Okay.
And when I reached out to Ms. Shepis to actually ask this, she said that's where she actually got her Screen Actors Guild card, was working on that Michael Bay movie.
Nice.
And so she's a nurse.
Nice.
She's a nurse somewhere in there. So we will put that on the list of things to watch. Pearl Harbor 2001. So yeah, she didn't show up. She doesn't actually play the biker chick, even though she's actually credited in it. They cast somebody else, but she had to go to a photo shoot with all the nurses from Pearl Harbor or something like that. So Emmanuel 2000 Intimate Encounters, she is in. So this was the first time that Rolf Konevsky actually worked with her, and he had actually met her at the American Film Market, and she had a production distribution company called Prescription Films. And if you go all the way back to the first episode of GoreFest at Tiffany's, I mentioned when I bought this stupid Trauma Coming Distractions DVD, there was an interview with her on it, and she actually mentions that, hey, yeah, she had a distribution company.
You know, and listening to like the sales guys like sell shit and listening to Lloyd pitch stuff. It's like, that's why I went on to open my own distribution company, which failed fucking miserably. But still, you know, I was able to like know the right people to raise the money to do it and actually get movies out there and have movies released and stuff like that and do minor theatrical releases. And if it wasn't for the work that I did for Trauma previously, I would have never, I mean, who knows how to do that shit, you know?
Prescription Films. So that's something I want to dive into with her at some point in the future, is to tell me more about this distribution company. But anyway, Rolf Konevsky was trying to pitch The Hazing at the AFM, and that's where he met Tiffany Shepis. And Tiffany Shepis loved it. They tried to raise some money for it, couldn't get it together at the time. But as we will bring this all back around to Emmanuel, the guy who owned Emmanuel was a man named Elaine Saritsky. And because Rolf Konevsky was sort of making these, Elaine Saritsky wanted to make Emmanuel 2000, Rachel, as the erotic being John Malkovich. That is what he said he wanted. The erotic being John Malkovich. Yeah. So
I thought being John Malkovich was the erotic being John Malkovich.
So basically, he had struck up a friendship with Tiffany and asked her, "Hey, you want to be in this thing?" And she was like, "Well, I don't want to be in a skin flick series like Emmanuel." She was smart enough to realize, I don't want to like do anything racy in this movie. But she's like, "Hey, I'll take a small part." So he cast her. Her and her boyfriend are. Well, Rachel, you watched this. Did you watch the end of Emmanuel 2000? I don't know if you got all the way through it.
Yeah, I to completion.
No way.
Tell me about it. Go ahead.
You didn't skip around a little bit.
I watched the whole thing.
Wow.
I watched the whole thing. I know.
Well, what's it? Tell
I'm not gonna lie. By the third movie I watched in a row, there was a little minor skipping of just the sex scenes because they were all the same. Okay, so basically,
she scans through Emmanuel and skips past all the nudie parts and watches the story beats. Okay,
it's the wrong way to watch.
No, I watched all of the parts of Emmanuel.
So between the two of us, we watched the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Emmanuel. Okay, whew, this is one. Okay, so it's basically Emmanuel catches the eye of this couple, who can't bang anymore because the woman scientist in the couple was in a car accident, which a lot of problematic shit around that.
Wow.
The
It's
disability stuff
basically
in this
breaking the wave,
is
isn't it?
not great. But fortunately, they have some very exciting technology. It's like a heart headband and a heart necklace that allows them to, I guess, being John Malkovich and other people and get them to have sex with them so that they can essentially have sex by proxy. But jokes on them because Emmanuel is super into having her body taken over and put into another body. So she decides to take this little act on the road and she goes to none other than Sin City, Las Vegas.
Let's
Yep.
skip ahead, Rachel, to the end where Tiffany Shepis shows up.
Okay. Well, it wraps up with a cyber orgy is the only way I can describe what happens. Like, this
So
is
Tiffany
a
Shepis
very
is
different
hosting
take
like a
on Skynet.
Yeah, she's hosting a Halloween party. Her and her boyfriend are hosting a Halloween party.
Yeah.
And so she kind of gets hit with a sex wave, right?
Yes. I mean, she has a very climactic scene, you could say.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's really kind of all we get of Tiffany is like her, I guess, debut orgasm.
Yeah, it's kind of
Is
like
this her first on-screen orgasm?
Meg Ryan sort of thing.
Yeah.
Barbarella, Jane Fonda sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's no nudity
I
or
would say
anything.
it's
She's
definitely
literally
played for
in this movie.
laughs. Like, yeah.
Yeah, she's in this movie for less than 2 minutes of screen time, and I think almost all the screen time is literally at the very end of this movie. I think it might even be like one of the last things you actually see because she's the last person in the party that actually gets this. So, like you, Rachel, I sat through this whole thing because I didn't know where she was going to pop up at. I'm like, where is Tiffany Shepis? And this thing is not like the others that we're going to talk about. I feel like Emmanuel is very different than like Vinyl Dolls. Jeff, would you agree to that, Jeff?
It's an interesting bridge movie though, because it takes kind of like her wacky hijinks from like the chick boxing thing and connects it to like her more actual sexy content that comes down the road.
The thing about this, I kind of scanned through them, and especially after you're like, well, actually, she's not even in there. Like, which, as a side meta note, it's like, just goes to show once again, you can't necessarily believe what you read. Hey, I read that so-and-so was in this movie. Well, it turns out to not be true. I don't know. Can I trust? What else is IMDb lying to me about? But regardless.
I was not expecting Jeff to go into a full existential spiral over IMDb tonight.
What strikes me is YMDB more like it's very juvenile, right? Like the whole all the gags are like things that like I'm putting myself back in when I was like 13 screwing around with my friends on the basketball court at the playground and talking about things that we had no idea of what we were actually talking about. We're just BSing with each other because we're idiot children. And that's the whole vibe of these entire movies. There's like the scenarios that are concocted about like a piano player. And what if the lady came up and like tipped over the piano? Like it's crazy stuff that's very, very juvenile. And I'm trying to put myself, maybe we'll get into this later, but in a very strange way, it's like these movies are for kids in a very, very strange way. And maybe we'll elaborate on that later. But like, I just can't imagine any adult person wanting to watch anything like this and understanding, of course, that the point of it is that there's, naked people in it. Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah, it's weird. It was definitely a weird experience, and
He's like, "I'll give you that. It's weird.
It's weird.
I concede. It's weird."
I mean, on one hand, it's very honest about what it is. It's not really meant to be watched in its entirety. It's meant to be watched in vignettes.
Like, Rachel, could you see yourself like you're having a party and like just as a laugh, this is on in the background while you're 100% doing other things? Okay,
100%. Like that's actually kind of maybe the second best use of a movie like this. Is it's so absurd. Putting it on in the background as a laugh, I think, could definitely make sense.
I will say Tiffany Shepis was the best part of the movie. She's got the most memorable scene. She's got the most memorable scene. It's hilarious. It's fun. I can't show it on YouTube because we'll probably get her channel would get nuked. But again, and this is going to be a repetitive thing that we keep saying, she has so much like charisma that comes through even in this
Mhm.
stuff that's like, she's on screen for 45 seconds, but she's the most memorable part of the movie. So yeah, she plays a character named Janice hosting a Halloween party. She's in it for a minute and a half, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the Emmanuel movies. Now, I learned from Miss Shepis herself that sort of rolling into like the big ones that we're going to be talking about here, Embrace of Darkness 3 and Vinyl Dolls, that she actually was on a Playboy show called Sexcetra.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Shepis, reporting from Boston, and tonight, Sexcetra has a VIP pass to an adult film festival. You ought to be in pictures.
And I just learned about this like literally last night. We weren't able to actually find any of these or watch any of these. So again, this is not on our IMDb page, which is what we're going off of. LionDB wasn't on there. So we are going to add this to the list of stuff that we have yet to watch and that we must watch to be completionists of Miss Shepis's filmography. But she was apparently like a host of this show, and I from what I gather, this was sort of like Playboy exploring real sexual things in different cultures around the world or something, or different subgroups of humanity and things of that nature. And then she was like a host of it. So I would guess maybe it was something kind of like HBO's Real Sex, if you guys had ever seen anything like that, where they would kind of focus on specific aspects of sexuality and things. I don't exactly know. Maybe it's kind of like an Edge TV sort of thing. Like she was great on Edge TV as a host, and I imagine she's going to be awesome on this, but I haven't actually seen this yet. Jeff, are you interested to check out any of the hosting of Sexcetra?
I don't think I'm gonna be. I did some light when you mentioned it, like, hey, have you heard of this? I was like, well, I did some light Googling, and you got to be careful because you do some
Light
light
Googling.
Googling of this, and based on what it is, you end up where you don't want to be pretty quickly, right? So I saw like a couple clips that were like okay to watch on. And the internet is not TV, but you know what I mean, like TV where you don't see all the explicit content or whatever.
Yeah.
So I saw a couple clips from this, and it came across to me like you said, like the old '90s HBO Real Sex, or like a version of Troma's Edge TV that was a little more harder core than that. So it seems like that type of thing, like some sort of VJ going and talking to these. The clip I saw was a bunch of clowns, literal clowns, like Bozo with the red nose and the shoes and the hair and everything, getting together for clown fun. And I mean, that was a segment on this TV
I love
show.
the dramatic pause there. Clown.
Well, I mean,
fun.
So I've seen some things like 1,000-yard stare after it. So yeah, I don't see myself going out and watching this. But now if you say like, here's the episode where she's a VJ and here's the set, I could watch that and be like, yeah, okay, I'm interested in seeing that. Just because, like, for example, you mentioned Troma's Edge TV, which I think is hilarious and so much fun, and she's so good in it. So if there's more of her doing that type of thing, I would be interested in seeing it.
Okay.
Was that clown sex intense?
I mean, they were funny. The clowns were all in character the whole time, and they were doing bits. So they were funny people. I would hang out with these clowns 100%, but I'm not going to at a certain point, they're going to be like, hey, it's time for this to start. And I'll be like, okay, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. You guys, Denny's,
fun,
9 a.m.
Honk,
okay,
honk.
right on. I'll see you then. Right?
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Google
so, yeah,
it. You guys, well, that's the thing. We didn't have enough to go off of. We didn't have like the Emmanuel, even if it turns out that she wasn't in the movie, we had these IMDb credits to go off of. So we don't have enough to go off of with this show to find which, because there's like 80 episodes of it.
There's a ton. It went on for like 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked her, I was like, do you know what season, what episode you were in? Like how many? And she just said,
she's repressed those memories.
Trying to find it. But she did say it's very weird. So I know you like weird.
That's I'm talking about the clowns. How much weirder do you want it to get?
Let's roll into. We'll save Vinyl Dolls for the last because I think
That's probably the best one,
she's
right?
a lead role. Yeah,
Spoiler.
she's like the lead in that. But we're going to talk Embrace the Darkness 3 from 2002, directed by Robert Kubelos of Indigo Entertainment. She's credited as Vanessa Lynch. She plays Anna, who's a news reporter. The notable thing here is this is her second death on film. So as you know, I decided, hey, I'm going to come up with a Tiffany Shepis death reel. So we're going to put all these deaths together as we go. I'm going to have to crop in real close on this one so that YouTube doesn't, blow up her channel. But she does die in Embrace the Darkness 3. So that's the second time we've actually seen her die. So Rachel, did you make your way through Embrace the Darkness 3? This is sexy horror, I would say. So tell me what you thought of Embrace the Darkness 3 and her performance in it.
Yeah, so this is like the first time I got to really get the full Shepis experience, right? Because last time it was a very quick moment and she was funny in it and it stood out from the rest of that film. But this is the first time that I kind of got to get a taste of what it is that she does and who she is a little bit. And right away I was like, "Oh yeah, I totally get why you guys latched onto her as someone you really liked growing up because she is the epitome. It's the aesthetic is so perfectly 2002. I didn't even have to look at the date to know. And she is exactly the cute, fun girl that everybody was in love with at that time. She is more beautiful than the girl next door, but has some element of girl next door to her that makes her feel very approachable and tangible. And she's funny and charming. And I know you guys have talked about her being charismatic, but I even before I watched the previous episodes and saw you, is to say that was my impression of her. I was something I was going to say is she has a lot of charisma. There is something very, even though these movies are ridiculous and over the top and very, very camp and arch, she is grounded in a way that is kind of surprising. There's a naturalism to her performance, even in something like this, that makes you just really connect with her. And her character is definitely the best one in this movie. And I know this is a Tiffany Shepis love fest, but regardless of that, she's absolutely the standout and most enjoyable character. She's the funniest one. She's the most realistic one. She's very sexually empowered in a way that is not super weird male gazy. I actually ended up pretty red pilled on the Shepis by the end of this one, and especially when we get on the next one.
Good.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I
Mhm.
100% agree with you in terms of just the funniest. There's a line in here when she plays this reporter, and the guy tells her, "Hey, I want you to go undercover at this vampires party or something," and she's in there and she goes up to I don't know, one of these guys, and she just makes this joke. And I will try to put this clip in here because it is genuinely
You can get
funny.
this one in.
Yeah, I can get this one in. But she's just yeah, I'm gonna fuck him up with my kung fu style, and it just, to me, I laugh like crazy.
Be careful.
Shit, Chamberlain? Fuck that dude up whoa, whoa, yeah, my kung fu style, bitch.
I just thought it was hilarious because it seems so weird. And you watch this movie, and everybody is so flat and monotone. It's taking itself so fucking seriously, this movie. And then when she pops in, because she's a minor character in this, she doesn't have a lead role or anything like that. It just feels like she's making the movie fun. The parts of this movie that she is in, she's trying to make them fun and make people be entertained. But yeah, Jeff, what were your thoughts on Embrace the Darkness 3 and Ms. Shepis's role in it?
Well, at first, the first thing was I was super nervous and super worried because, I haven't seen Embrace the Darkness 1 or Embrace the Darkness 2, and I was super worried that I was going to be lost, but I think I figured it out. No, absolutely. The scene that you point out about the goofy kung fu joke, that to me is the whole thing. And I don't know if this is true or not, but it's almost like she was breaking the fourth wall because everyone else in this is really bad. super bad, and
Yes.
she's very good.
Super bad.
She's very good as a baseline, and then on top of the baseline to be funny. Like I said in one of the previous episodes, I put such a high premium on people being able to execute humor at a high level, and she has been in everything that I've seen her in. She's executing humor at such a high level. To me, that's one of like the most difficult things to consistently pull off. Like even people who you thought were super funny, eventually they fall off. And obviously this is early in the career, so she hasn't had a chance to fall off yet. But when you're able to execute humor in that way, in this context, like you're in this weird smut vampire movie, this is before Twilight and before anything else. Like everyone is still like super serious about all this stuff. And she's super funny in it. I really, props to her for pulling it off. I will say the lollipop thing, like I about have to like, turn away and go leave the room because that was really hard to watch. But I don't know. Everything else is awesome.
Which was worse, lollipop thing or getting the roof of your mouth scratched?
Oh man.
There.
Oh wow.
There's a question.
That might be a horse apiece, to use a piece of local slang.
Well, I would never say to anybody out there, like, run out and go watch these movies. I don't think these movies are great by any means, but I think clear, and I will say this in the context, sort of going forward, just my own personal experience. A couple years back, I was directing a movie, and the producer put so much stress on me that I started having health issues because of it. And when I went to the producer, who's a good friend of mine, I won't name drop him, a good friend of mine, but I went to him and I said, "Look, man, you're not pulling your weight here, and this is having an adverse effect on my health, like physiologically bad." And he goes, "Matthew, just stop worrying about it. Let me deal with all of it." And I was like, you can't say that to me, because if I could just let it go, I would let it go. Why would I want this anxiety on myself? Of course I could do that. So I say that to say, like, I don't, presume to tell Ms. Shepis how she should or should not feel about these particular movies or anything, because it doesn't seem like, she would put these high on her reel, like, "Hey, let's go watch this performance of mine in here." But what I can say from my perspective of watching both Embrace the Darkness 3 and Vinyl Dolls, having never seen them before, is that she is the best part of them. She is literally the best part of these.
By a
She
mile.
brings the best energy, the best fun. And they were good. They were fun to watch while she was on camera. So, from as a Tiffany Shepis fan, I'm coming at this from a fan. In all honesty, the performances are not bad. And what's interesting is I did ask her about this because, you know, how do you approach this subject, right? It's like, "Hey, tell me about, all this, tell me about these, sexy movies that you did." And,
Yeah.
it's a little uncomfortable, right? So, I didn't throw a ton of different questions at her, but I did basically ask, like, why? Like, why did you choose to do these? And she did say that, number one was they offered a lot of money. So these were, got a windfall from these movies. She thought that working for Playboy at the time was a pretty cool job. So it was just kind of a cool thing, like, wow, I'm working for, Playboy and whatnot. But the other thing that she said is what I think, I would, if she ever asked me, like, "Well, what do you think?" I was like, "I think this is sort of sums up why these things maybe shouldn't be as embarrassing, or I wouldn't consider them as embarrassing." She said she thought her acting would be able to overshadow the racier scenes that are in these movies. And I think that's kind of like a testament to, she's trying to do her absolute best in these things, and she succeeded, in my opinion. It comes across. So Embrace the Darkness, I think it as a movie as a whole, it's not good. It's not good. I don't think you need to watch Embrace the Darkness 1 or 2. It's
I
not a
couldn't
good
tell you
movie.
really what happened. There were some vampires, and some of them were good, and some of them were bad.
So let's get into the big one, Vinyl Dolls. Now, before we get into Vinyl Dolls, obviously the name of the all-girl band, rock band that's in this. Rachel, do you remember the name of the all-girl rock band that was in Embrace the Darkness 3? Because there is one, and I was like, is this in the same universe? Like, are there dueling Like, wouldn't it have been cool to have like the Vinyl
Cinematic
Dolls?
The
universe.
music is
Yeah.
not dissimilar.
Like
It's
Vinyl
not.
Dolls
I don't remember the name of the
pre-Tiffany
band.
Shepis. Yeah, but they could have like Indigo Entertainment could have had a whole cinematic universe here where they could have had the Vinyl Dolls before Tiffany Shepis joins the band in Embrace
Mhm.
the Darkness 3. So you see that cross. These are the things as a filmmaker I think about. Missed
The
opportunity.
metaverse,
Yeah,
gross. I
missed
like it.
opportunity. Indigo Entertainment.
Things weren't
Mash
Vinyl
as
Dolls.
headcanon
things weren't as
spinoff.
franchise oriented back then.
Yes,
But yeah.
yes. Come on now. I
Yeah.
mean, these are just obvious. I mean, they should have just done. What do I say? But Vinyl Dolls, 2002, directed by Buddy Beal, who I think this could IMDb thing it says this is the only movie he ever did. I believe.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But
Yeah.
could it be?
I was trying
Could
to
be a
look him up because
pseudonym.
I was like, this is interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like,
So
is
at
Buddy Beal
least
a woman? I feel like Buddy might be a woman
okay.
based on this
Could
movie.
be. I don't know. I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out. I'll put because I do have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that is just filling up with questions to ask Tiffany Shepis as we go through this. It'll be like an 8-hour
Ask
interview
her
with her at
about
some
Buddy.
point.
I have
I will.
Buddy
I'll put that
related
on the list.
questions. Like I
Okay.
was in the Discord, like, do you know what you're deep diving? Do you know anything about this director? Specifically,
Yeah.
because I came out of this movie like it is such an outlier in so many ways.
Yeah, it's weird.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And Rachel, I'm just going to throw this out here. Anytime you want to be on GoreFest at Tiffany's, you are more than welcome. So, if you want to jump on
I
a
mean,
future
like
episode,
you may
feel
have
free to jump
coined
on.
a new fan.
Absolutely.
Good.
I'm pretty into
Don't
her.
forget to
I'm
hit that
actually
like and
pretty-
subscribe
I'm
button,
pretty
Rachel.
blown. Please help us out.
Yes. So, Vinyl Dolls, 2002, directed by Buddy Beal. Now, this, at least, she had a million movies. Tiffany Shepis had a million movies that came out in like 2001, 2002, 2003. I don't know the exact order in which all of these things were shot, like the production schedules of all these. So I don't exactly know when Vinyl Dolls came out in relation to like Bloody Murder 2 or anything like that. But just in terms of LionDB, we're going sort of up the list here. So this, as far as we have seen, is her first lead role. Correct, Jeff? I mean, would you
I
say
think
this
so,
is
yeah.
her first lead?
Yeah.
Okay, so she
I
plays
would.
a character named Finola, who's kind of running away from an abusive boyfriend and answers a call for an all-girl band, the Vinyl Dolls. Rachel, I'm going to go to you. You have thoughts on this movie. So you watched Embrace the Darkness 3. You saw Emmanuel. It sounds like it's just getting better and better as you're going through. Give us your thoughts on Vinyl Dolls.
I will say the quality of the film is directly proportional to the amount of Tiffany Shepis is in it, as
100%.
proven by this movie, which is far and like by far the best of the three. Like this is high quality smut. I think she's fantastic in it. I think that the sexual politics of this are so wildly better than the other two movies. It's unbelievable. Like this is 2002, 2003, but this movie is like basically the poster child of enthusiastic consent. Like almost every single sex scene was initiated by the woman. Her pleasure was centered. She actually got to come, like, and on top of that, it's the only of the three that actually has a story and like could be there's a version of this movie that is not a not softcore film. Like there's actually a plot with character development. Like, does it go super, super far? No, because at the end of the day, like that's not the agenda of this movie. But like there is a level of love and intention and like effort that is in the screenwriting and the performances across the board that is not existing in the other ones. I had a good time watching this. This is the one that did not feel like a slog to get through because first of all, she was in it throughout, but like it reminded me of like a handful of other movies from this era of like girl, like Satisfaction, girl, which has a very sexy name, but it's not, that are about these like girl bands, like kind of like finding their power. This one just happens to have some sexy scenes in hot tubs and whatnot. So I don't know. I actually really liked this movie. I had a good time with this and I thought she was great.
Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll echo what Rachel says. I think it's among the movies, like there's only been a couple here, Embrace the Dark, but like if you cut out all the the explicit sex scenes and you just watch the scenes of the characters telling the story, otherwise it would be an actual complete movie with a beginning, middle, and an end. It might be 40 minutes long, but so it has that in its favor. The production values, everything sort of looks much better than some of these, in my experience, have. So it looks pretty legit. Miss Shepis herself is obviously like everyone else, and I do not mean to denigrate these other people; they're great, but everyone else seems to be in the movie because they are an adult performer who's going to disrobe. She far and away stands out as being an actress in this film, being acting, whereas the other people are sort of maybe performing. So that's a distinction. I think the music is like right on the cusp of being good. If that's not too silly to say, but like maybe
Didn't
the
you want the
song is
soundtrack
good,
for
but the
this? Like
singer's
you were trying to
bad.
find the soundtrack?
I was trying. I pay for Spotify. I was trying to find it. What's funny is like we've all grown. I know Matt and I, and maybe Rachel too, probably maybe everybody in on planet Earth has grown up around bands, friends who have their own crappy garage band, and maybe they go play at the bar once in a while or whatever. So like you know what it means to sort of like feign interest or feign that you like someone's song, right? And I could see like my friends playing these songs and me being like, oh yeah, I love when you play the song about everyone wants to be like me. I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. So cool, 'cause daddy taught me how. But the song's really bad, but you act like you like it because you like the people, right?
I love
It's
you,
about
DJ.
the people.
We love you.
And they're expressing themselves, and yeah, exactly. So that stuff is kind of like, because there's like 5-6 original songs in this. There was a really interesting Twitter thread the other day. You can Google this, but there's some country song that plays on an episode of X-Files from like season 6. And you just hear it in the background, but some fans like latched onto it and are like, what is this song? I wish we could identify it. And they, go through this whole thread of like figuring out who wrote it, who did the music for this, because it's just lost. They eventually do find it. It's a kind of a heartwarming thing. They find the person who made this song, and that person has the song on like a hard drive in their garage or whatever. But what I mean to say is like you can pull like music out. I could see someone out there watching Vinyl Dolls and being like, I love that song. I want to get a copy of that and play it. So like I think that's fun, because like you don't have to put original music in these movies of this sort. And then lastly, the most befuddling part of this movie is everyone in this movie looks like, these are all people about the same age as me, I think. Everybody looks like they're on their way to their shift at JCPenney in the mall. Like this is supposed to be like the rock and roll nightlife. And everyone in the movie, from the band, from the people in the band to the record store executive to all the people in the club to the guy running the club, they all look like the end cap at JCPenney, which is very strange. Like I that's the thing that's like the one thing that's like making the hair on the back of my neck, stand up. But other than that, it's fine.
The hair on the back of your neck stand up? That's a strange observation, friend.
Hey, watch the movie with that thought in your mind, and you'll be like, yeah, I can't believe this. They all look exactly like that. This is like the Delia's catalog if they made like a version for Mormons or something. It's very strange.
Oh my God, this is a very specific read.
Jeez. Wow. Okay. Now, one question I will ask you, Jeff, is the last episode at the very end, you said that you had actually seen Vinyl Dolls before. So upon rewatching it, did it hold up to whenever you saw it the first time? Did it get better or worse?
Back in the, I do not remember where this aired. That's a question. Like, I don't know. Like, we know the Emmanuel and stuff, but like, I don't know where these things got picked up. Like, were they only ever on Cinemax, or could they have been on different channels? I do not know where I saw this actually. And at the time that I saw it, I didn't know who Tiffany Shepis was by any means. But it's probably better now because I know who this person is and I have an interest in this person. At the time that I saw it originally, it was just like another one of these movies. But
Okay.
yeah, I that's a weird memory. I don't know where I saw this.
Well, I will once again echo, aside from the JCPenney thing, I will echo what both of you have said in that I didn't think I kind of like this movie. I'm kind of on Rachel's side. I'm like, I don't think it's nearly as bad as maybe it's assumed it is. I definitely think Tiffany Shepis is by far the best. I know, Jeff, you made a comment, was like, she's good at lip syncing. It's difficult to actually lip
I
sync to a
I
song, and
I
you were like,
wondered
did
if
she
she was
sing?
singing these songs and playing the guitar, yeah,
Yeah,
because it looked to me like she could have been.
I don't
Yeah.
think she's singing it, because at the end credits, it's got some performed by, and it doesn't list Tiffany Shepis.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
regardless, when you're watching it, it's difficult to do this. I mean, I was in multiple bands. It's difficult just to play, let alone try to lip sync to whatever. So, but yeah, I was like engaged in the story of this movie. I wanted to see how Tiffany Shepis' character was going to get out of this situation with, the abusive
Sure.
ex coming towards her, like the cops. Like, I wanted to see how it all played out, and I was actually like engaged in the story of it. And I do think, for what it's worth, sort of like the racier scenes in this, I do think that they, just from the filming perspective, it is way different than something like Embrace the Darkness 3. Embrace the Darkness 3 looked like it was shot with extreme, obviously male gaze, but very like almost, I won't say like gross titillation factor, but it bordered on, like, maybe
No, it's
Jeff.
gross.
Yeah, yeah,
Sleaze?
it's very sleazily shot. And this film I didn't feel like it was shot like that. So I do think this is very different than Embrace the Darkness 3 in my mind, just in the ways that, the sex scenes of all the actors was actually filmed. And again, maybe that gets back to the director, Buddy Beal, whoever Buddy Beal is. And
Mhm.
but yeah, I actually I didn't think it was going to happen. I actually ended up liking Vinyl Dolls more than I hated it, but she's fantastic in it. And that kind of
Mhm.
wraps up this section of Tiffany Shepis's career. Now, sort of going forward, what's going to be very, very exciting starting next episode, episode 4, is I think we're finally getting into kind of like the horror stuff, right? The start of the Scream Queen.
Yeah,
So we're going to be
yeah.
talking about Ted Bundy, Death Factory, Scarecrow, and Bloody Murder 2 Closing Camp on the next episode. So for all of you individuals who are diehard Tiffany Shepis fans who are like, when are they going to get to the horror movies? Well, the horror movies are going to come on the next episode. But I do want to just sort of talk to you guys about some random things that sort of came up as we were sort of watching these and discussing them. And the first thing I kind of want to bring up is the idea of, because going forward, Tiffany Shepis is, she's a scream queen. She's one of these scream queens like Debbie or Sean, just, always getting topless in these various movies and things of that nature. And how we sort of approach that as genre fans. Like, obviously Jeff and I, two young guys watching, some beautiful woman get naked in a horror movie. Of course, we're going to be into it, right? It's just like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But was there an expectation, at least at that time, and has the expectation changed? I guess nowadays, 20 years later, from what the horror films that were being made back then to the horror films being made now. I'll start with you, Jeff. Like, what was your expectation when you were watching these movies as a young man? Whether it's a slasher film, like I'm talking low budget, not necessarily like your Hollywood stuff, but low budget slasher films and stuff. Was that an expectation? Was that something that you're like, okay, well, I kind of expect there to be nudity and sexuality and extreme violence, and was that what you were there
Mhm.
for when you were watching those movies?
Absolutely, and the joke is that, like, everyone talks about how gory the movies are and how there's naked women all over the place, and then you actually pop in the Friday the 13th cassette, and it's not, if you actually, got out a piece of graph paper and wrote it all down, there's not actually that much blood, and there's not actually that much nudity, but in our minds, it was, and it was there, and that's what we wanted and what we thought we were going to get. So, like, I think these movies let our imaginations run wild, and maybe all of this is different as the information age has marched on, and literally all of this stuff is at your fingertips. You can find it all, but back in the day, there was a mystique about talking about, hey, have you seen that movie? That's crazy, such and such happens in it. And so we would go and get a hold of them and put them in, even bleeding into the early 2000s, like what these movies that we watched tonight were from. That was still there to a degree. So yeah, absolutely. As a person, you were like, you rented a movie hoping that stuff was going to be in there. You were like excited that, yeah, this is going to be the one. This is going to be full of blood and guts and naked ladies to boot.
Yeah, and I remember distinctly when the Griffith Street house, where it was, can't remember that whatever video store was over there, but they had 5 for 5, right? And you're still renting
Audiovisual World.
Audiovisual World, yeah, you're still renting VHS at that time, and you would go there and you
Mhm.
would look at the cover of the VHS box and be like, oh wow, look at this, half naked woman in a painting on the cover of this with a monster attacking her. Yes, I'm going to rent that because yeah, you kind of wanted to see that
I
stuff.
remember somewhere in the chat earlier we talked about the Witchcraft series, right? Which is this
Yes.
long running. There's like 13 plus entries in
Yep.
this. And at Nebraska Land Video, they'd have them lined up, and you'd look down the spine of the cover. And I portray myself negatively here, but like you're looking down the spine, and Witchcraft 1 says horror on the side, and Witchcraft 2 says horror on the side, and Witchcraft 3 says horror on the side, and Witchcraft 4 says erotic horror on the side. And you're like, I'm gonna that one. But you have this, like,
What's
what you're
does
gonna get from it.
erotic mean? What is erotic
Yeah, what
horror?
is
I
this?
better check
Is
this
that
out
naked
and
ladies? I'm gonna get that one.
take a look. Okay, Rachel, when you were sort of watching horror movies sort of growing up, from your perspective, obviously very different than, young men like Jeff and I were. What was your sort of perspective on these horror? Did you find it to be a problem when you would put in a slasher film and then you would see, okay, here's the actress getting naked again or doing whatever? Like, what were your thoughts on that kind of whole thing?
I mean, I think it's why I'm not a huge slasher fan, to be
Okay.
honest. As much as I am a horror fan, I think part of why I never really got into the slashers in the same way that a lot of, other horror fans did is because I never really felt like there was that much there for me until like later iterations of it. Um I wasn't necessarily offended by it. I wasn't seeking it out, but I didn't it didn't I didn't have that spark. It didn't scare me and it didn't, you know what I mean? Like you guys
Yeah.
got the little like that charge of like sex and violence combined. Like it did not necessarily do for me the same thing. And I think I think that's why I'm not really to this day much of a like once in a while a slash will come along, but they're never my favorites. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not really my jam.
Yeah. And I
I
guess I'll,
say with this next to me.
yeah, no, it's fine. I guess I'll discuss this a little bit from the filmmaker's perspective because I'm a director and I've directed a lot of movies, and some have had nudity in them, and some had not. And as I was sort of gathering my thoughts on this topic in particular, I started questioning myself. I was like, well, why did I put nudity in specific movies? Like, what was the reason that I chose to do it? Because there's a choice to be made, right? As a filmmaker, you can say, well, I could shoot this in such a way in which the meaning gets across, but we're not showing, breasts, for example. Or I could shoot this in a way in which, yes, we are showing breasts and doing whatever. And so I was like questioning myself, like, well, why did I make the various choices that I did throughout my career? And I'll go back to the very first time I actually shot nudity. I won't go into the story because the story was absolutely ridiculous. It was a sex scene with one of my best friends.
Good story.
It's a
I know
funny
this
Stay
story.
tuned for that somewhere.
it's a funny
I
sometime.
know this story.
it's a funny story, but we won't get into it. But I'll bring this full circle back to the first episode of GOREFEST at Tiffany's. And I mentioned, as I was growing up, when I wanted to be a movie director, I read Lloyd Kaufman's book, How to Make a Damn Movie, right? And Lloyd Kaufman, God bless that man, but Lloyd Kaufman has a very unique take and a specific aesthetic that he puts out there for his trauma movies. And I remember him basically saying, distribution. You have to have this stuff for distribution. There are so many horror
Mm.
movies coming out there. And again, this was when I don't know how old I was, 21, 22, however old I was when we were making these movies, when we first started. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, we want to distribute, right, our film, right? So this first movie that we're gonna make a slasher film, and everything I read at the time was like, you have to have this in here to even have the slightest chance of distribution. If it's in there, you still might not get distributed, but if it's not in there, you're pretty much guaranteed to not get distribution. So that very first movie that I actually filmed nudity, it was not with sort of like an artistic, I tried to come up with an artistic reason why it was in there. I was like, well, I'm writing the script. It's going to subvert expectations because the final girl turned out to not actually be the final girl. But that got all screwed up after 5 years of starts and stops. It's a whole story. It's PTSD. I don't want to get into it. But point is, the initial sort of thing that I did was it was for distribution. It wasn't necessarily for the art of the movie. It was to try to get the movie out there. By pie in the sky, we're going to be big filmmakers and we're going to make lots of money, because this kind of stuff has been in horror forever. From the very beginning, when people first started filming stuff with cameras, they've filmed naked people, right? I think if you were to ask just baseline, do people enjoy watching naked people? I mean, Rachel, you might disagree. Would you disagree? Like, people like it, right?
Have you
I
ever
mean,
been to an art museum from the Renaissance? Like, it's full of
exactly,
nudity.
Mhm.
We,
exactly.
as humans, want to see the naked form, period.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
biological. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so I think, like, on a basic level, you could make the argument. I'm not saying that this should be the argument, but I think you could make the basic argument. It's like, okay, um, Tiffany Shepis gets naked in Bloody Murder 2 in a shower scene or something like that. And you might ask yourself, a critic of that might say, "Well, you didn't have to show her nude in there. You didn't have to." But then on the other hand, you could argue it's like, but people find that pleasurable. If the idea to make a movie is to make people have enjoyment, you're sitting there, you're giving this movie 90 minutes of your life, and you want to see things that you baseline like and enjoy as you're watching it. You could make the argument that nudity in these types of films is just part of it, and it's part of horror. It's been part of horror for a very, very long time, decades at this point. But I do think there's a fine line where you can start getting into like an exploitation angle element to it that can be sort of very problematic, as Rachel would say, that you kind of have to be very careful about as filmmakers. You got to have like a responsibility for that kind of stuff. But sort of baseline, like, me growing up, these are the movies that I saw as a kid growing up, right? And I think we're all sort of like formed and shaped by the time in which we are raised. And as I was growing up,
Of course.
it's these movies. I love Chopping Mall. Did Susie Slater have to show her boobs in Chopping Mall? No. This is like through osmosis. You see all these movies in the 80s and the 90s and these exploitation films. And then as these filmmakers age, they want to put on screen the things that they liked and enjoyed when they were younger. Like, right? So I don't know. Those are kind of like my thoughts on it. Like, I don't personally have any issues if someone wants to get nude on film or anything like that. I don't find it sort of like a bad thing or anything. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Expounding on anything that I've said, or branching off into your own questions, or anything?
I mean, I think that like in a vacuum, nudity in horror films, nudity in films, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a jumping off point for a larger conversation about like parody of nudity or
Sure.
the juxtaposition of violence and nudity. Like those things, I think when you get into the nuances is like where it's a little more complicated and can get a little hairy and is worth a deeper dive. But I think just it like is it wrong for there to be nudity in horror films? Is nudity in film period wrong? No. Of course not. Of course not. Like at the end of the day, nudity is a part of entertainment and film is art, but it's also entertainment. I don't know. And art has like I said has lots of nudity in it. I know that like we started off the show talking about how like maybe this is a part of her career that Tiffany is not like the most proud of, but I actually think that there should be no shame in this at all. I think she should be proud of the work that she did in these because she did a really good job with what she had. And I think the one where she was a lead is actually it's like aged pretty well, you know? So I don't know. I I have no problem with nudity and horror. I have no problem with like sexy films like this. I think
Yeah,
They
and I
exist because we as people, as the human creature, want to experience it. And I think having outlets like this to see sexuality, explore sexuality, get sexual release, like those are all like safe places in the way that horror films are like safe places to get catharsis around like anxieties and fears. So
yeah.
I don't know. It all
I
kind of falls into the same umbrella to me.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this when we were talking about vinyl dolls, but I actually loved your reaction to vinyl dolls. Considering like Jeff and I, it's clear like we are fans of Tiffany Shepis. So someone who is watching this like, well, of course they say that she was good in this and blah blah blah. But you who were like really unfamiliar with kind of her, coming in like, actually I liked vinyl dolls. I think that's really really cool, and that's like it's sort of like a testament. It is. It's like it's a testament to like it's there's something to these movies, or there can be elements to these types of movies that are positive for people that do. I mean, they're not maybe saying the deepest message out there. They're not trying to answer what is the meaning of the existence of life or anything like that. But there are things about these types of films, and whether it's a Shannon Tweed movie that was like, yeah, I have great memories of Shannon Tweed when I was was a younger person. Those movies were fantastic. They serve a point and a purpose, and I don't necessarily think that a lot of people are like, well, we know what the point and purpose of these movies is, ha ha ha. But I think it goes deeper than that. One of the articles that I was reading, and I'll link that in the description as well. I think it was by William Bibiani, who's kind of like a big internet film critic and personality. I think he has a YouTube channel and stuff. But he wrote this way back in 2012 because Cinemax
Mhm.
was putting these movies out up until a decade ago. This isn't like it ended in the early
Yeah.
2000s. I mean, they went on for till 2012 ish, putting these movies out. And of course, there's all kinds of
Yeah, I
stuff
think
like.
those articles, Matt, about the ending of it is super interesting, so I hope you include those links.
I will, I will. But like Zalman King, I remember Red Shoe Diaries and
Mhm.
things of that. And even like if you watched
Mhm.
like
David Duchovny.
USA, right? Where they would have like silk stockings and stuff. There was no like nudity on USA, but you'd see sexy stuff. What this article was mentioning, that Willem Bibiani was mentioning, was that and we could argue the artistic merits of any of this. I'm not saying that there's some grand artistry here, but he was mentioning that you watch stuff like Red Shoe Diaries and things of that nature, where just the way it's filmed is different, right? So if you watch like a hardcore sex film, a lot of them, it's like, here's the camera, we're just going to go in. There's no like artistry. I'm sure there are
Them
plenty of hardcore films
bodily
out there
organs.
that there just
It's
is
like watching
plenty of.
a medical film.
Right, but like you watch the Red Shoe Diaries. By the way, I was flipping through Tubi. It's on Tubi, so you can go out there right now and watch
No,
episode of Red Shoe
no
Diaries.
way. With
Absolutely,
David
check
Duchovny.
it. Yeah, Red Shoe
There's all
Diaries
kinds
is
of
on
Tubi,
Tubi.
NC-17 shit
Tubi
on there.
stays winning.
Yeah.
Tubi stays winning.
Love Tubi. I love Tubi. A ton of Tiffany Shepis's movies are on Tubi, by the
How are
way.
how are
So
you gonna pay Netflix? How are you gonna pay Netflix money when Tubi is sitting there?
yeah, Tubi's amazing. It's the best streaming service, bar none. But get back to the article here. It was mentioning that it's like there's a loss of the way that these things were filmed and shot, right? So let's use Vinyl Dolls or Embrace the Darkness. When they show a sex scene in that, it is the jazz music, the goo, like sometimes there's slow motion, and like there's candles, or the blinds or something are moving. Something is happening, right? So the way it's filmed is supposed to be like, I guess, in erotically filmed. So you're watching it and you're like, ooh, this isn't just like camera boom in somebody's crotch, pound, pound, pound. It's actually, you know, obviously, I'm not arguing this is high art.
Can I
I'm
see
not.
that diagram again? I don't think I got it the
Yeah, yeah.
first time.
I'm not arguing it's high art.
Slower.
What I'm saying here is that these were shot in a specific way that is gone now. Like, these films don't exist. The way these things are shot don't
Yeah.
exist. They for all intents and
There's no
purposes,
perfection.
yeah, we were talking, Jeff, about in last episode how there's so many of Tiffany Shepis' stuff that's just gone. Like Some Fish Can Fly,
Yeah.
just gone. These movies in 20 years will, for all intents and purposes, just be gone. I mean, there are DVDs. I mean, you can
Mhm.
get on Amazon and find DVDs of these things if you really wanted to. But how many people have access to like a high quality, a high definition version of vinyl dolls. That's never going to exist. They're never going to re-release this in any sort of format. And unless you're
Yeah.
going and digging
Come
and
on,
trying to
Vinegar
find this stuff,
Syndrome.
vinegar syndrome. But I just feel like that there was something to these movies. There was a power to these movies, whether it was for Rachel and Shannon Tweed or whatever. I mean, there was something about these movies that we have lost now. It's gone. And I think that's kind of sad in a way. Were they the best things made? No, we can all agree on that. These things were not good. Are a lot of them just throwaway trash? Yeah. But personally, I'm not going to say that there aren't great softcore erotic films out there because I've really not seen. I don't know. I mean, I did link an article to 24
I'll
best
say it.
softcore
There's
porn
not any
movies
good.
of all time. Okay, well, I'm not going to make that declaration. Witchcraft 9 could be amazing for all I know. So I'm not going to go that far.
I wonder how many
But
of the witch. We should do a witchcraft marathon, Matt.
we should. Rachel, when you come down in
CMA.
May, do you want to just do like 14 hours? Are you comfortable sitting around a bunch of sweaty dudes watching softcore erotic horror?
Only if you're willing to make a lot of like eye contact with me after each movie.
Oh no, I was going to make eye contact like during, right? So it's kind of like it's happening off to the side, and you're just
Pop the popcorn. Let's make it
Yeah.
happen.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is episode 3 of GOREFEST at Tiffany's, where we've talked about some hot films with some hot topics. I want to definitely, thank everyone who has been watching the show and leaving comments on the videos and things of that nature. Thank you so much. Next episode, we are getting into the stuff that I think we really are interested in moving forward. We're starting to get into the horror movies. So Ted Bundy, Death Factory, Scarecrow, and Bloody Murder 2 Closing Camp. 3 of those 4 are on Tubi right now. And I think Scarecrow's on YouTube. So all of these are available. So if anyone wants to sort of bone up, for lack of a better term, on these movies before the next episode when we talk about them, I will put all kinds of clips of these in the next episode. So again, apologies, we couldn't put a bunch of clips on this one, but hopefully our conversation strikes a chord with you. With that, we will see you on episode 4.